Hey, Adriana.
Hi.
Super stoked about having this conversation.
Mm,
So much with you that I want to dive into. I
mm.
know it's just going to unravel as we go, but your energy and just watching you from a distance, I just have to say too that it just makes me, some days whenever I have low energy and I see your stuff pop up, it like gets me to move and dance and like talk some shit and just I'm like, okay, all right, she's still going, I can still go. Um,
I know that feeling. Yeah, I feel that too.
so we're in a new year, and I'm curious, what was something in 2022 that was hugely shifting and moving and learning for you?
One of the probably kind of main themes for me was really connected to like a deeper layer of worth, because it's like for me, it's forever the receptivity wound, forever the journey of worth. And what does that really mean? And what does it mean like internally, but how, because for me, worth it's not reflected on the outside, like the outside is full of all kinds of shit and it's the world. So like I can't control it. So it's like not depending on the outside for my worth, right? That's been such a huge thing the past 15 years of healing. But this year was like a particular thing around money, around, just that experience of what it means to be someone who explores the body and the subconscious and who goes into subconscious realms, which is total fucking bananas, as you know, Britt.
Mhm.
So I do that too. And
Yeah.
then come on the other side and be like, so anyway, blah, 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 blah. Like, we should all do that. It's like, let's get together and do that. And then like I'm doing this work privately with people and charging this and charging that. And, and it's not like a charge your worth. It wasn't like that because it can sound like that from gathering the pieces of what I'm saying. Cause I don't believe in that. I think your worth is like a million billion suns. So like, good luck charging a million billion suns because nobody.
Mhm.
But I also feel like it's a big journey to kind of own that being a healer, an intuitive healer, own that being a somatic healer, own being who I am is like it's worth money, like the same way that like, everything else that people do is. I think that there's a huge paradigm around that. And for me last year was a lot around dismantling. I had done money work before, but it was really deep. Like it was like going into the yucky, icky, sticky, yucky things that I was just like, I don't want to do this, like that
Mhm.
feeling of like, wow, this is really uncomfortable. So that's kind of the low end. And then I would say the high end would be really kind of in the same line of like, just what do I want? Like that ability to have the choice to go from like, I'm in the fog of the underworld and I'm a dark cloud and like, I'm a bad vibration right now. Like I'm a bad person and like, and then all of a sudden be like, okay, so what I really want is, I really want to feel like my relationship can hold as much as I can. What I really want is to feel like the people I'm serving are experiencing themselves as love very directly. What I really want is, whatever, in the moment that might be true.
Mhm.
So I think choice is like, and I teach so much about choice for this reason, choice and consent within ourselves was a huge theme for me in 2022 is like cultivating choice, which actually is quite painful because you have to
Mhm.
confront all the ways that we aren't actually, we're expecting others to like make some kind of choice for us. And
Right.
that sucks and
Yeah.
hurt to let go of, but so liberating.
Yeah. So one thing that I always, well, I witness you do is taking that shadow, which I can feel like the intensity because it's very relatable to me,
Yeah.
and moving it through and
Yeah.
moving it through your body
Mhm.
and the practices that you do so that there's no stagnation and that it's just very unapologetic.
Mhm.
When did you start coming into that? how old were you? What was going on in your life to be like, I've got to, it's like this innate feeling, you know, when we're younger, we do it. We have like
Yeah.
tantrums and we do
Yeah.
all that shit until an
Yeah.
adult gets embarrassed by it or tells us otherwise. And like, we're moving the energy. So in adulthood, when do
Yeah.
you feel like you started coming back into that?
Yeah, it was very specific actually, because I had done a lot of spiritual work and training that didn't include that, you know, for a long time, like gone to India. And when you visit India, especially as a Westerner, I mean, that's the last thing that you're going to, I mean, even today when I go there, I'm not flailing around with my tits out, you know what I mean? I'd be a
Right.
total asshole, you know? So it's like, you like cover the fuck up and you like connect to the Shakti and like you fucking hold that shit. And
Right.
so I also want to say that I think the permission to do that also comes from my ability to hold it. And I think that that's something that I also gets taught on a kind of subtle level, like, you know, when people do kind of then enter the space that we don't, because part of it is like the expression, the allowing of that energy to move through. But there's another piece that is like actually being able to hold it. You know what I mean? And so for me, that kind of need, and it really was like becoming possessed. Like we are all possessed all the time by different states, if you ask
I
me.
feel that deeply.
It's like, what am I possessed by today? Well, I'm possessed by the unconscious abandonment of my
Uh-huh.
addicted father, whatever. Or in this moment, you know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
can help to see it like that, right? I mean, it's kind of
Right.
Jungian kind of idea, you know, but I had studied a lot of work, like traditional tantra, like not you know, not focusing on sexuality, because traditional tantra kind of, that isn't a part of it. And if it is, it's very secret and it's very like later, and it doesn't really work the way it does nowadays that we kind of share it so openly.
Mhm.
Traditionally, it wasn't like that. And
Right.
so it wasn't a lot about expression. It was just about connecting to energy inside and like holding it. And so I went through a really intense death when I was 33. And it was like the loss of just so many things in my life, as we all experience in different moments. And a lot of grief, unprocessed grief from my father's death that happened some years before that, that I had been numbing in different ways, you know, and it was just like a big culmination of just like fucking trauma, rama. And
Mhm.
33, 7 years ago, like we didn't really know that much about like the general healing public, because still lots of people don't know about trauma. For the record, for everybody listening, there's a whole
Yeah.
world out there.
Yeah. It's
But
true.
it wasn't on
Mhm.
Instagram. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even have a therapist. It was like, it was a
Mhm.
fucking mess, you know? So all I knew is I needed to move, and I like could not sit still, and I needed to like see myself. Like I needed to like record it. And for me, that was, and this is also like pre super selfie vibe. You know what I mean? Like you go back, like I didn't have like taking a selfie was like a fucking horrific like thing. You know, it was just like I fucking hate myself. Like this is disgusting. You know, where now it's just like we're all like, I know how to look good in a selfie. It's like now it's like a part of our hand. You know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
that back in the day, it wasn't like that. So I just knew I intuitively needed to see myself, and I was living in Topanga Canyon alone in this barn that was like literally a womb. It was like barnwood ceilings. It was maroon. It was like, and I lived there for exactly 8 months. And then she sold the house and I had to move. Anyway, so during that 9 months, I swam in the ocean every day. And I was just like, fucked. Like, I was like, my business fell apart. My relationships were falling apart. It created a
Mhm.
whole mess with my relational life. It was just like I was alone. And then I moved across the country from everybody I knew. So I was like alone. And I just started moving my body. And, you know, when I was a kid, I was a dancer, but I hated dance because I didn't like following the instructions.
Mhm.
So I loved to dance. And my mom told me, she was like, you just couldn't do it, you know? So it makes sense now because I'm not a dancer, you know, I don't like, I'm not technically trained, but I carry a lot of liberated energy in my body through movement. Right.
Right.
So that was kind of how it began. And I just started doing it. I started being in nature every day, going on hikes, going swimming, and just like writing what my pussy wanted to say. And, you know, just started doing all this kind of embodiment work. And a lot of it was like from this initiation that I had in India with this goddess in this temple, in this goddess temple. And I had this mystical experience, and the energy
Mhm.
that came into me through that mystical experience was kind of what erupted and pulled up all this trauma. And then I mean, I'm not blaming her or that experience, because I think people do that and I don't think it actually works like that, but
Right.
it brought stuff up that needed to, like, I actually needed movement in order to work with it. And that's kind of how it happened. And then I just started learning what I was doing on a somatic level, on a physiological level. And generally that's how I've always been. Like, I've always intuited things, and then I learn, oh, someone else came up with this great system for it, so let me learn some of that and then continue to make it my own, because I've never been able to really buy in, or not buy in, but I've never been able to like do someone else's system fully. I usually make it like halfway through, and then I'm like, all right, I'm done with this. I already know. And then I kind of, move on and create my own thing. And not really I'm creating my own thing. It's more like I'm just doing what God is asking me to do. And if I keep following that, it's pretty clear, and it's painful and it's beautiful. And I feel very grateful most of the time, is the main underlying thing when it comes down to it. Is that I'm just like, thank you, God, that I'm alive, and that all that movement and all that stuff that came up then was really that, because I was having a lot of suicidal ideation and a lot of ancestral trauma, like coming from addicts, so much abuse, so much intensity, and really sitting with it and seeing it and moving it through and being like, bitch, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm going to stand here and like dance to like, back, Christina Aguilera. I don't know. I really did that, it's like, whoa, okay. But, and Madonna, whatever, whoever. And then I started realizing like, oh, people do this. And I'd go to ecstatic dance and, dance a lot, like all of, Gaga, I started doing different forms of movement. And then also doing somatic therapy and work personally, but then doing trainings around trauma and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I remember going into the deep diving 2012, 2013 in this self, healing journey. And a lot of people jumped up on that train at that time. But I remember thinking two different things. If I could be naked in front of anybody in a non-sexualized way, then I can do anything. That was one thought. I was like, taking really beautiful like self-portraiture, because I was really heavily into photography at the time. Like, if I can do that and I can show that. And then the next thing was I was matching with people and seeing people doing exactly what you're talking about, which was the dancing and the movement. So then it was like me dancing naked by myself. And then I'm like, okay, if I can do that now with other people, or then now if I could just dance, it doesn't have to be naked, but just to dance.
Yeah.
And
metaphorically naked. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those two things were like huge.
Same.
I've got to do this because I know I'm fucking terrified of this.
Totally. Same. Yeah. That was the other thing. Yeah. Like taking nudies in nature. I mean, come on. There was like a whole, we didn't even know each other then.
Yeah.
Like, I need this, like, I don't know. I just like the need to be seen. I think the need to like bring our identity back into our spirituality, because for so long it was like you either were spiritual and you were dismantling your ego and you had no ego, quote unquote, or you were just stuck in it. And you know what I mean? And it was like, like all these like femme beings came, we're like, that wasn't really like, you're gonna birth out of your pussy. Like, what do you think? Like, what happens? Like, you're gonna talk about that? Like this body, like, hello, so I think that was, at least from my perspective, a part of that, like why we were like, like, yeah, like get your ass in nature, be alone in nature somewhere that feels, safe-ish. And then, take your clothes off and like, see what it feels like. And, see yourself in your video and your camera, it's huge. Because when you have that kind of wounding that draws you to spirituality, which is like usually no boundaries as a child, then you don't know who you are, and learning who you are on an egoic level is actually quite important in order to give your gifts, right? Solidifying that at the same time that we're also always constantly loosening from parts of it, and loosening from all of it, hopefully as a practice sometimes, but then coming back into it and saying like, here I am, like, let's do the thing. Like, we're here to do some work. So let's do it.
Yeah. The going into nature and then slowly like taking my clothes off as an adult and using my camera and video or whatever it was. It's like I was revisiting that part of myself that did grow up in my, my grandparents' farm. I was out there. I just wasn't naked. And you know what? if it would have been a thought that crossed my mind, I would have done it. I would have been riding my horse through the field, butt ass naked.
Love that.
But it's not something like, but I just knew that like my church was out there, and my grandparents tried to make me go to church. It was like 3 times a week, and it was like my worst hell. And I'm like, I can go out here with my dog and be by myself and enter in that space. But it was just all very subconscious.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's like, and I'm very much wired the same way, where it's, I want to pick up tools from someone as like my mirror, but then I'm gonna go about it and branch off and do it my own way. So that it's gotta be like, okay, I've taken enough now. I don't need to keep grabbing onto you, or so it feels, for sacred sexuality especially, and tapping into that, because by nature I have been so sexual since I remember being in the 1st grade. And I knew I liked boys, but I didn't really, the first thing I ever did in a sexual way was with a little girl. And like, that's a lot of us, right? But I never thought lesbian or heard those words. It was just very fluid. It didn't matter. Like, all these labels didn't fucking matter. And moving through that, I just remember being just innately super sexual, super sensual. And so my grandmother started saying things about my body, and then first sexual experiences, and it just like layering upon layer on that, and like smothering that part of myself. And for me now, it's working back towards that, and being really enlivened and attracted to women like yourself who are doing that work, because it's still something, as sexual and liberated as I am in many ways, there's still some, and I was talking about to Carly about this too, and the female prostate and squirting, and like just what we've been storing. Our natural right. To do that. When did you start coming into that work and feel aligned and gravitated towards it?
I mean, I love what you just shared, and thank you for being so vulnerable and so personal. It always feels so good, like knowing that we're going to share this with others. And I just really believe in the power of our personal story. And I believe, like, maybe more than anything.
Me too.
I really do. Like, I just feel like, like our human experience is so enough, and so I believe in the power of sharing that. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I love thinking about you and your dog and nature. I was like, oh, and I could like totally see you as a child, like in that moment you're saying that.
Feral.
I was like,
I was very
totally seeing you. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm like riding on your horse, and you're like, that would be amazing. Like,
that's when I first knew that, like, not knowing what a clitoris was, but I knew that was there, was from riding a horse.
Oh yeah. Like, oh
yeah, what is this?
Like, that's good. I mean, and it's so like, I love also, I'm going to answer your question, but I love also what you said, Britt, about like tapping into that innate, the spectrum of our sexuality, and also not just our sexuality, right? Because like you said, like so many of us as little girls have experiences with other little girls, and, even our very young experience, like but also it's so human to like orient towards what feels good. This is what feels like, but like really feels good, before we come into, okay, well, now I have to numb out and do drugs or do this or do that to feel good. But it's like that inherent thing, and in my experience working with Tantra and working with like mantra practice and energy, and it's the same thing, because in Tantra, our true nature is bliss, and not bliss as like, bliss bunny, like fucking yoga tent vibe. I mean, like real bliss that includes everything, that includes grief, that includes joy, like bliss is everything, right? And so, and ecstasy, is our true nature in tantric philosophy, and also has been my experience of doing practice, where you really can tap into ecstatic states through practicing, relating to them as our true nature. So anyway, I just wanted to also mention that because we're just wired to want to feel good. And that's also why we develop all kinds of addictions, because life is hard and life is intense and life is brutal. And we've been so socialized to lean away from the natural ways of feeling good. And so, now we're hopefully, at least some of us on this planet are returning to them. So hopefully, that can keep growing and expanding. But the sacred sexuality work really was birthed for me through that during that same time. Also has always been a thing for me, but lots of unconscious. Like I had lots of just unconscious, like I was always very sexual, but it was kind of one of those things that it was unconscious for me because I had so much self-hatred and I had so much trauma. And at some point I was so disconnected from my body that like literally I was like on like Pluto, and I was like, my body was like going, like walking down the street in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and I was like, and I'm on another planet. So, but I always had this kind of like, rah, it was like unconscious. It's, trauma can do that too, for me anyway. It's like, it can give us this kind of unconscious, like, and it's also just, I'm Italian, I'm passionate, I'm a sexual being, I'm a fucking gremlin, you know what I mean? It's like, it's there. So it's all there, we don't have to you don't have to like make it one or the other, it's all there. And so when I went through that time, part of what was breaking down for me was this particular unconscious tendency in relationship. And of course there was sexuality involved because I was an adult and there was sex involved in these relationships I was having. And I was just having this awakening of like, oh, like this shit is like not okay. And this was some years into like my sobriety, which for me kind of marks a lot of my conscious living, more conscious living, but it was like an emotional bottom. Like I had not been in touch with my emotional body. I had not been conscious of what my emotions even were. I mean, this is like I'm 33 years old and I'm like, I don't fucking know what my emotions are. Like, I'm just in a sea of just like, I'm a mess. I was a mess. And I was like at a rock bottom. And, and I started feeling that as I was moving, I was also turned on. And I was like, when I had that initiation with the goddess, I took a vow it was like very automatically. I didn't like think about this. It's always weird to tell these stories, but it was like, I took this vow to like share the energy of the sacred feminine, with as many people as I could. And I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew I had fucking lost my mind after that. And it was really hard. I wasn't like, now I'm going to share the energy in the world. I was like, I'm dying. I'm alone. What am I supposed to do with this? But part of what happened was I was like a walking orgasm. And I went into a mode of celibacy, like also not like totally on purpose. It just like happened. Like I was just like so traumatized, but I was also so turned on, but I was also so afraid to get close to anybody. And people didn't even really want to come near me. Like I was like a fire. Like I would go to the grocery store and people would be like, I felt like people were like, like moving away from me. Like I was just like, it was intense. It was very intense. It was a very intense moment. And I was super turned on. So I'd be in nature and I'd be like, I guess I'm going to masturbate in nature. Like it just started happening very naturally. Like more just like, oh, this is also an emotional release. This is a release of this energy. I was carrying a lot of energy. It was too much energy for my body at that time. Which is what happens sometimes, it's you prepare yourself so much and like sometimes you get a bomb and you're like, okay, I guess this is going to take me 7 years to like integrate.
Right.
So, and then I kind of, when I started sharing it with others, one of the first times that it came through to share it, like, cause I was teaching yoga and I was teaching women's workshops and things like that. I was kind of like feeling my way in, and I knew this woman named Cleo in Joshua Tree. And I would go and stay with Cleo, who I don't remember how I met. And because it was such a weird time in my life, I didn't really have any friends. And everybody I met, I was like, I don't resonate with anybody. Like, I was just like, this is so hard. I was like, I don't get it. And I was in California. I'm from New York. It's like, I literally didn't resonate with anybody, but also it was hard for me to find anybody. But Cleo was amazing. And she had a yoga studio in Joshua Tree. And she's like, oh, you could teach there. And I was like, okay, great. And I taught this, and I just like, I do these women's circles. It's really simple. We just share, I share a topic, do a little meditation, little yoga, stretching, little movement, mostly sharing, mostly listening, counsel. And I led this meditation that was like connecting to this energy, this sexual energy. Cause when I got there, there were all these older women. And I typically don't have a lot of older women around, but definitely that don't come to my class back then, especially. And I was like, I just felt the intuition and I followed it. And I also think I felt safe because they were older. So I just kind of felt that like, I can't fuck with that. You know what I mean? They're going to be fine. You know, like there's no, they were like wise older women in Joshua Tree, blah, blah. And I remember I led this meditation that was just like connecting to this energy. And I just remember they were like, that was amazing. You know, because I think I had like dabbled in it here and there with people, but it's like it would just like go over everyone's head. It was just like, I don't know where my sexual energy, what are you talking about? It's like, well, it's somewhere or it's not, but even the absence of it is something, right? It's still the energy, you know?
Right.
So it was just such this confirmation of like, and because they were like, that felt great. Like, this is awesome. You know, they were just like so into it, you know, and like, it was so fun and we just had a great time, you know? And so it was kind of that seed that got planted. And then I started to do more studies with other older women around this, you know, around sexuality and around harnessing our energy. I started doing a lot more work with fire, like meaning like literal, like learning how to make fire. Cause my fire was all over. It was like, it was a mess. I was a mess, you know, it wasn't just sexual, but to me, sexual, creative, rage, it's all the same, coming from the same source of energy of love, essentially. But it was like all over. And so that was kind of how it began a long time ago. And then I just started doing more gentle work of energy. And then I found teachers, Sally Kempton, you know, that actually worked with sexual energy, women that just kind of started doing that work. And I started learning how to do it more energetically, work with it consciously, energetically, but also with fire. And then I started holding over time spaces for that. And then, yeah, just maybe a few years ago, I found Deborah Sundal, and that's been the person I've done more of the physical work, like meaning gaining access to my physical body, my womb as a practice, you know, not just to orgasm or ejaculate, but to actually just be in touch. And like what you said, Britt, about like so many women have had the experience of ejaculation. I hear this all the time when I work with people, all the time. I mean, like 9 times out of 10, when we're teenagers. Oh, I remember wetting, like feeling like I wet the bed or I peed, or somebody said, like my experience, it was like, and I would be drunk because I was a teenager and I was a fucking, you know, always drunk when I was a teenager or on LSD or on mescaline, I was all the things. And when I was in high school, it was like total, you know, and having this shame, like feeling like, oh, did I pee in the bed? And being like, oh, you know, getting fingered or fucking whatever, I don't even know, but just remembering waking, it's like wet. And it's like, oh, my bed is wet. You know what I mean? Even if somebody's not mean about it, it's just like, oh, I gotta rein it in. I don't even know what's going on. Right. And so then like what you were saying of then we start holding this fluid it's I think anatomically it's fine. It just goes back into your bloodstream, but it's like energetically, we're holding this sacred life, you know, the sacred life, part of our sacred life force, right? That comes through our body through ejaculation, just like, and also just the idea that like, we don't know that it's okay for women to ejaculate, but people with cocks and men can ejaculate all over the fucking place. And you get hair in your eye and you're like, oh yeah, obviously like people ejaculate, like, woo, you know, it's like a party, you know what I mean? It's like, why isn't this a party? So I think that there's also just such an opportunity to heal shame and to get in touch with our emotions, because that particular part of our womb and our vagina really is connected to our emotional body. It's connected to our heart. It's connected to the vagus nerves. It's connected. And I've directly experienced it many times. And so there's so much benefit to doing this kind of practice and work, even if it's not going to, like, you know, it's like sometimes just for a period of time, it's just like, oh, I'm going to tap in with that right now. It doesn't mean like then you become somebody who's like constantly whatever, like meditating with your G-spot, but like, I meditated for fucking 20 years. It felt like before I ever even meditated with my finger in my vagina. And I was like, what? How did that happen?
Yeah, that's the same for me. And just going back to the beginning of when our sexual experiences happen, that like for me with a boy, and with the opposite sex, it was so different because with my friends, I was always the instigator. I was the curious one. I was like, hey, yeah, let's do this, let's do that. And then I just shut down completely because of things already happening and being cheated on before and feeling obligated. Oh, now I have to do this thing. Now I have to lose my virginity. Now I have to have sex with him. Now I have to perform this thing to feel safe. So it's like the father wound just blaring in my face, but going into it like that, my beginning of my sexual experiences, it's almost like the time where we're meant to come into a liberation and union with a human being was the opposite for me. It's shut down all of that primal, just animalistic, natural essence of myself.
Totally.
And then I was taking in this energy of this boy as well. And then years and years of just continuing to do that and shut my body down. So it's like you're saying, and I imagine like that, like golden nectar, just like stockpiling. It's like this energy that's like a fucking atomic bomb in there.
Yeah.
And it has been I've done so much work on everything else in the womb, especially. So healing that part, the painful periods and the painful sex in general, and at least coming back to finding that primal, I don't have to get drunk to have like crazy wild sex kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Getting back to that, yes. But I think the next level for me, and that I hear from women that I work with, and that we're coming online to, is this female, ejaculate and this very, very primal and ancient practice.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. That is what you're saying. Like, I love that you're saying primal, because it's like that primal, alive, sacred energy. It's like that is who we are. You know what I mean? And it's like we've obviously been so conditioned, so far out of that experience, and why it's, even if it's like I'm holding a circle for grief and rage, it's like it still takes so much work to get people. I do this work all the time, so it's not hard for me because I've been practicing it so much. But like, if you haven't practiced it, you might be like, yeah, I need that. And then you show up and you're frozen. I mean, I just know like the amount of like, okay, now just, people like,
I know.
Like,
I know.
Like, but like we have to allow ourselves that space too, right? It's not because it's like we have to come out of the freeze, which what I love about the G spot, oh my God, I love so many things about G spot, and you didn't ask me, but I just have to say a couple of things, is that the G spot is, you can't force that bitch. It's like God. It's like grief and God and the G spot. I always say this, like the three G's, like you can't control them, and you can only surrender to them. You can only surrender. That's it. That's all you could do. And it's hard work because you feel your G spot and you're like, I don't feel anything. And I'm like, well, that's called numbness. So you are feeling something. It's a sensation. It's called numbness. Amazing. That's amazing that you feel numbness here, because if you've been getting fucked hard and fast your whole life, who hasn't, that your G spot gets numb, period. End of story. We need to, and if you choose to do this work, I should say, you get to massage and be with that numbness, and then feel the layer of sadness that's underneath that numbness, and then feel the layer of grief, and then feel the layer of anger, and then feel the layer of rage. And sometimes there's pleasure in between each one. And sometimes the pleasure comes after them all. Sometimes it comes first, and sometimes it's in the middle. There's no controlling that bitch. It's just like, what's happening now? What's happening now? And it's constantly changing. It's also not like, well, one and done. Now I know how to connect to my G spot. Right. Although, awareness builds, it's still depending on what's going on, depending on what's going on in your relationships. For me, it's like, it's online, it's not, she's there, it's numb, it's pleasurable. And so learning how to orgasm and ejaculate, but also in a way that's really like healing, you know what I mean? Like there's something so healing. So it's not judgment. Like we do somatic work. We can't we can't judge ourselves. We can only get curious, right? We can only kind of say like, oh, I'm noticing, right? This is really numb. And it's like, okay, how does it feel to
Right.
be with that numbness? You know what I mean? And it's like, wow, it's kind of makes me sad, or it's kind of like neutral. I don't know. It's fine. So it's like really allowing ourselves the time it takes to do this kind of work is important. And gives us the tools then that we need to like have relationships with people that are going to last a long time.
Yeah. And talking about just being slow and steady with yourself, it's like every time when I hit a layer I had not yet moved through when it came to my sexuality,
Mm.
liberation. So again, like whether it be nudity or dancing or being with partners where I didn't have to get drunk in order to be like, I had an alter ego
Yeah.
in that space. Her name was Celeste. Shout out to Celeste. She already died. But like I buried her a while ago. And
Yeah.
it was really what I needed at the time to see
Totally.
that version in myself. But it's such a different liberation when you don't need the substance or the MDMA, or you don't like
Yeah.
you don't need all the stimulant to
Right.
be able to speak what you want to when you're having sex, to ask for what you want, and to know that there's spots that you feel numb. Like I remember the first time I had like such an intense orgasm that I just started hysterically crying.
Yeah.
And every time that happens, my tears and my hysteria
Uh-huh.
comes from in that moment, I feel so close to God. And
Yeah.
that it like so there's that grief in it that it's gone,
Yeah.
but then it's that like gratitude that it's there,
Yeah.
and it's both at
And
the
that you
same
can't
time.
like hold on to it. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, like it's both of those things.
Yeah.
And
I love the way you're
then
doing that.
yeah, so I like getting to that place where it's hysterical, like
Yeah.
crying,
Yeah.
and then
Mhm.
the idea is in the future, I think that of union and connection, and through the tantra practices, like
Mhm.
you have a partner that can hold that and look at you as a fucking miracle, like
Yeah.
this like holy shit, and watching that.
Yeah.
And so for me, the work that I've done in the last 7 years to get where I am, and to be, I'm not in partnership at this time because it's taken me this long
Mhm.
to get to the place
Mhm.
to come into partnership in the next partner and to feel like I can unfold.
Yeah.
But I still know there's still layers there,
Yeah. Always.
that I'm willing to go forward into. But it's
Yeah.
just, fuck, it's so
Yeah.
much work.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I always like to like, I'm always like, whenever I'm done teaching a class, because even if I'm just like teaching a class, this is like where we are. I'm like, we're going all the way, like we can't not go all the way in. But I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, now you did the work, like go see a movie, like go live
Yeah.
your life. Like people need to be reminded, like this
Mhm.
is why it's like with grief work, right? Grief, it's like we go into our masculine because you literally have to figure out how to compartmentalize. Like you cannot go through really acute grief, and
Yeah.
also you just have to learn at some point, like I got to go to work, I got to live my life, I got to figure out how to put this to the side, and you can't control it, but you can somehow get into that space sometimes because you need to, it's survival.
Right.
um but it's like that a little bit. It's like then if you ignore the grief, right, then your fucking relationships start, it's like everything gets fucked up because you have all this grief and it's unconscious and it's creating all these ways for you to experience it. And so there you are. But to consciously create space for it, right, to consciously make ritual, to consciously go on retreat, to consciously say like, this is when I'm taking care of this, to consciously take a class every week where it's like, this is when I'm dealing with my fucking emotional
Mhm.
tornado storm of like self-abandonment and abandonment and patriarchal, abuse. You know what I mean? Like it's like of course we're feeling it all the time, but like to have certain spaces where we're doing that work. And then the rest of the time, it's also like that in relationship. It's like I've been with my partner for a while, and it's like literally you have to be like, just put the trauma, we got to put the trauma to the side
Mhm.
because it's never
Yeah.
ending. I mean, because we're
No.
both fucking Jupiter and Scorpio. I mean, come on. like it will never end. Like we're like, ooh, what are we healing next? And then the other one's like, ah, it's like, I don't want it. It's like, oh, what are we healing now? The other person's like, ah. So it's like, okay, we have spaces where we do that. Like we have couples there, but we have spaces to tend to that part of us because we're powerful people. And we have strong unconscious too. We have strong unconscious and we have strong power, and oftentimes those things go together. So it's like, you got to find the right spaces. So then the rest of the time you could be like, no, we're not doing that today.
Yeah.
Hang out. And I'm just like, like we're going to go to the movies. We're going to like make love, even if we're like, this thing's there. It's like, no, that thing is not get to take priority over my life, whatever trauma I'm feeling at the time. Because I got a whole life. I got a lot of liberation to live in too, as you and everyone else,
Yeah, I cannot not live a life like that. Like I'm going to be radically and unapologetically human, like I'm going to eat what I want. I'm going to do the things I want. And I'm the one that will have to have the consequences for it. Like I know what I'm going to make me feel like shit, but I might just keep doing it anyways. And it doesn't make me less conscious or less spiritual, or, I'm just not buying it. I'm not going to buy into all of these narratives. I mean, there's just so much complexity in all of us, full of nuance. And it's just, we all have such unique physiology and what we've got stored in these bodies and this fascia. And I mean, sometimes my path of least resistance is eating that ice cream for dinner and like binge watching 1883, which is the most poetic fucking, I'm just, oh, it's so good right now. But it's like Western cowboy, like it's brutal, it's violent, and I'm able to hold that.
Capricorn?
Now, well, Neptune, but yeah.
Anyways,
but my Mercury is at 29 degrees Scorpio.
Okay.
And quite a bit of Scorpio Scorpio moon at 24 degrees.
Okay.
So I can go into those spaces and not into them and let them swallow me whole. I can go swim around and I can be in it, and then I'll go to sleep that night and not think a thing about it.
Yeah.
I can separate.
Totally.
Yeah. And just the human behaviors of why we create what we do, whether it be like the horror movies or like the brutal fucking stuff, that's hard to watch, but it's a part of what's going on in the entirety of the collective of the unconscious.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me. I like grew up just very fascinated with death and just the whole process of it. And I feel like that's really served me well. But going back to talking about grief and realizing, for me, it was in spaces I would have never guessed to. And coming to terms with the anger that I felt, because I was very, like, when I was a teenager, I was very hostile. I was very confrontational. My mom called me jagged glass. She's like, she's pretty to look at, but she'll cut you, She said that in a comedian type way, like not in a like mother wound later way. But it was true. And it was just such this heavy shield. But coming in the last 7 years of doing the body work with sexuality, it was really grieving how long I stayed and was a deliberate participant in the continuation of my body just being numbed. And like having painful sex or having with someone I knew was unfaithful and exchanging energy with other people and infecting my body. Like on all levels. And when that finally hit, of honestly having to take responsibility for myself, and it was like, oh, like I always was like, no, he was just a piece of shit, and wounded. And that's what woundedness did for him in acting out with his addictions with sex and substance. And so the grief was like me wanting to go back and just get up, like leave it, like stop, and that I couldn't do it. because I grew up such a feral, headstrong, like by myself in the woods with my dog and my horse and feral. And I felt powerful out there. You talk about the goddess, and like
Yeah.
that's where I felt. And I have had an experience with like, I kind of call that energy the dark mother.
Mhm.
And I've had that experience too with and without plant medicine,
Yeah.
but one really, really intense one with plant medicine. And it was just like twice her coming in, like, let me show you who I really am.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was primal, and it was death, and it was like,
Mhm.
it was beautiful. It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And yeah, those experiences I had with that energy
Mhm.
and with my grief all put into like a cauldron and like mixed up.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's what forever changed me. And dropped, I think, really for me, like a fourth wall of not caring to share these life experiences I don't have shame for. Like I could pretty much share anything and everything that I experienced, because I don't, all those versions of myself I've had funerals for. I
Totally.
am not her.
Totally. And that's such important work, because then, like, I feel like that helps us to really own that essence of liberation that we all carry. I think we get so stuck not able to because of the shame, and the shame is there if we're not looking at it, like even things you've done. And I mean, I am forever, I mean, I've done terrible things. Like I played the victim, I played the perpetrator, I mean, like I've gone all around the fucking triangle multiple times, like literally, and like like so horrifically, and suffered because of it, because I am a sensitive soul, because I am a Taurus and I am loyal, you know what I mean? So like it's painful when you have unconscious shit play out, and then you're like, but I'm just like a girl.
Yeah, going against our
Like, no,
own
you're not,
nature.
bitch. Like, wake
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
like what you're saying, I really resonate with, because that's when, like, when people ask me sometimes, it's like, well, I'm doing all this inner work, but it's not showing up in the outside. And it's like, well, bitch, you need to open the closet. Like, shit's not gonna come if you don't open the closet.
Where's the cupboard?
Like, what do you think it's just gonna like happen? Like, you're just gonna take it from like the fucking like white supremacy and the patriarchy's been doing forever? You're just gonna take it from someone else now? Like, get out of here. You can't do that anymore. You gotta fucking open the closet and deal with your fucking demons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, and that, like, I love what you said about the dark mother, because yeah, that was my experience too. And it's like that. It's like it's like, here you go. And even if you haven't done it yet and you're doing work with it, it's like sometimes you have to actually do shit in your life. Like sometimes you
Yeah.
can't even just like, okay, I encountered it, and like, okay, no, it's not. It's like, no, sometimes you got to like go into some realm in a relationship where, you know what I mean? And it sucks that we have to go through that sometimes, but that's where the deep self-compassion is built, because we have to really look at those pieces and say, wow, it wasn't okay what happened, and I didn't know any better. And if I
Yeah.
did, if I had the consciousness I have now, then I would have done something different, and I couldn't have. And I see that, and I see her, and like what you're saying, right? I've buried those versions of myself. I hold some of them close because they're just terrified children. I give them space. I give them boundaries, because they didn't have that when they were, and growing up with a father who was an addict. You know what I mean? It's just satisfying everyone else's needs all the time, people pleasing to the point where I didn't exist. And from that place, you better guarantee some fucking nasty shit's going to come out eventually. That's why, like, as a facilitator, when you work with people, it's like, if somebody's pedestaling you, you better rein that shit in right away. And you better get that fucking people pleasing shit out of the way, because you will get sued, or you will get fucking bad articles written. I mean, that still might happen. I'm always waiting, but like you got to be, we have to be, we don't have to be, but I choose to be conscious of these things, because it's like everything has a shadow. And what you're talking about sexuality, and you also brought in addiction, and you brought in grief, and it's like one of the main energies I work with, and when I work with people, is this energy of Lakshmi. And she is so much about the energy of inherent worth, right? Like everything in nature is just like pulsating with this energy of like auspicious worth. It's the energy of what sustains us, right? That's not destroying, and it's not necessarily creating, it's just sustaining everything. And one of my teachers, Sally Kempton, says, that the shadow of her is addiction and greed. And it's interesting because when people are doing yoni work, when they're doing womb work, and I think why they're also afraid to do it, but I'm like, also like, that's not your fear. Like if you're afraid to do it, it's your fucking, it's the patriarchy's fear that you've just digested. And as soon as you start doing the work, you'll realize how very quickly it's not scary at all. It's just like, you got to fucking be willing to just get there. And that in itself will heal you, just fucking getting there. So I'm just putting that out there to everybody because like, I hear that all the time. It's like, well, I'm scared. I'm like, you're scared because you've digested the fear of like society, and it's total bullshit. As soon as you show up, that fear dissolves. Literally, you're on to the next. You get right into the past. You go through the portal just by getting there. And then there's something else to work with. But, there's this thing with our womb, and it's like, you can't really not address our addictions. I mean, you can, but like, at some point we got to really face like even just the ways we're addicted to certain kinds of relationship and certain, like you were saying just now, like, what is our part in this? You can't really get around that if you start doing deeper work with worth, with your womb, with sexuality. It's just, it's confronting, you know what I mean? And it's not for everybody. Like I'm not, I always encourage people to do, the deep work because I'm a cheerleader for it, because I was a cheerleader my whole life. Well, from 5 to 15, and then I was like doing way too much LSD, and which I did do as a cheerleader also. I was a cheerleader on acid, literally. But I know it's not for everybody, and there's always places that you can enter, and that's why consent is so important in doing deep work, because you get to choose. And the choosing, right? I never take people places that they're not, consenting to go to. And in that choice everywhere along the way, you're going to get so much out of it. We get so much life force back when we show up for these deeper, more shadowy realms that we're talking about. There's so much life in there. So much. It's like the deep earth, it's like the fertile soil of the earth. It's the, that everything, everything comes from that unknown, that mystery, that dark space. Every time we enter it, we get so much back. And it's such a gift, that's why I refuse to be afraid of it. As soon as I'm conscious that I am afraid, then I refuse to do it, because it's like, no, this is life affirming. This is what affirms life. The fear is what takes it away. And I really believe that, like, I have to consciously choose what affirms life every day.
I'm more afraid now of just like not touching that edge, not touching that, and having that experience. It's not running from it. It's like, I want it so bad, and I know that's because of my experiences with it, obviously, because there was one particular time I had like a full-on embodiment of it, and I just began channeling, and I was not in control at all. And I had zero fear. I mean, my ego was gone. And I've had a couple where, experiences where my ego steps aside and I become like the little bird on the branch, and I just watch it, and I watch myself, and I'm really coming from the higher self. But this was like the mother. This was like, and I just kept saying out loud I had a partner at the time who was not ready, and he was not where I was, and he was in the same room, and he was like, holy shit, I can't go to where you're at. And I just kept saying like, oh my God, who am I? Who am I? And then I just said, if we only knew like how powerful we were, but there's no words I could have used. It was all the feeling inside. And it was like, I could create a fucking planet in that moment. Like, it was so powerful. And I've only had that twice in this life. And I feel like the relationships I've been cultivating and the partnership moving through all my codependency that I have moved aside. And then when you're with someone, shit will always come and arise all the time. But it's to come to that place of not needing, but desiring, not forcing, but just flowing in all relationships. And I don't need that embodiment of the goddess in a way that I thought I did before, because it's there. And I don't have to feel that way all the time, but it sure does feel a lot better than walking around with rage and resentment and anger towards my past self or someone in my past. And last year, Emma and I did this. I don't remember what it's called, but it's an Osho meditation where he does many different layers where it's like, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's the doing the arm flapping thing with the breath and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I told her, I was like, no, I don't think this is gonna work. Like it takes, like this isn't really I can go deep and I can do some channeling shit and go like
Yeah.
hypnosis. This 10 minutes in, I was fucking tapped in and
Yeah.
I was like in a trance
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
were bawling and
Mhm.
it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was like the parts
Mhm.
still trapped in those spaces. But anyways, I went back to this time. I had a vision when I'm like crying and hitting the pillow. I went back to this time in the house that I conceived my son in, and then after he was born, we lived there for a while. A piece of me was still in that house, like a fragmentation of me was there. And like I walked in, I hadn't thought about that house in forever. And I
Yeah.
walked in and I saw myself up in this isolated space I would be in. And
Mm.
I just worked all the time to stay busy. And I was, talk about numb. I did
Yeah.
a lot of MDMA then. That was like my connection to God.
Yeah.
Completely disconnected from nature. And I saw myself in there and I just stared at me, like on the bed. And I was like, it's a cage with the door open the whole fucking time,
Yeah.
You chose to be here.
Mm.
You chose to stay here. You
Mm.
had options and you were here. So it was like, oh, like I forgive you. I love you. You didn't know any other way. You just sat and waited for a man to come choose you and arrive here. And same, that's what I wanted from my dad. But I literally, through the embodiment practice, through the movement, through
Yeah.
breath,
Yeah.
transcended time and space
Yeah. Totally.
many
Totally.
times. That was shocking because I had not thought about that place. And then the fact that I conceived my son there and then he was born there, which was a huge catalyst
Yeah.
of like not wanting to just end it and still
Yeah.
remaining on the planet because I had something to wake up and take care of each day
Totally.
for
Totally.
myself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I see you doing these practices and what you are helping and assisting others do,
Yeah.
it's very fucking real work.
Yeah.
And I say that to people who haven't done it yet, but it's like,
No, it's so incredible. I mean, the body, and the cool thing is it's like sometimes, yeah, it's like we do these, like what I love that story so much because you're really giving a very clear image of like what's possible, because it's like the body, right? It has this implicit memory, which means it goes beyond our cognition. So it has memory, our body that our minds it doesn't pick up on, so when we tap in with that, we are tapping into God because we're tapping into the mystery, right? The body is the subconscious. It's the moon. It's like, it's what we don't know, right? So every time, and of course we're taught to fear it, blah, blah, blah. So just like throw out the fear and just get in there. And then it's amazing because it's like, wow, like what you just said, where it's like we can go, and same thing with the G spot, but also just doing somatic movement, not even getting into the G spot, but both, right? They can take us to these transcendental states. Absolutely. I mean, it happens all the time.
Yep.
And even something as simple as sometimes when I work with people one-on-one, which is also really fascinating to me. And also I've experienced this on the other side. That's why I can hold space for it. But sometimes just exploring, like, I don't know if somebody's like disconnected from their husband in terms of sexually, and then we kind of are unpacking that and working with that. And, and then there's this like, oh, it's like, well, when he does this one thing, it just, you know what I mean? And you go into that, oh, when he does that one thing that just like makes me feel like so cringe. And it's like, well, if we explore the cringe, every single time there's some traumatic memory. It's like, oh my God, well, when I had a baby and then I was trying to breastfeed and like, oh my God, and my nipples, and like some nurse told me to like, blah, blah, like, it's like, there's something that's connected and it's like, oh my God. And it's like, well, like, and then all of a sudden there's some tears, there's an emotional release, and boom, you're free of that experience that was held in your body that was making it uncomfortable for you to experience pleasure.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's like, that's why it's so fascinating to me, because you really can access totally transcendent. I mean, you could access so many things, and also you don't have to like figure it out. You can't, You just have to be open and like willing to like be guided, or, you know, build a relationship where you feel safe doing that. You know, sometimes you have to build that if you're not, if you have a lot of stuff going on. But other times it's like, oh, wait, we can just explore that. And people have all kinds of experiences that liberate our, not just experience of pleasure, but liberate our purpose, right? I know you work a lot with that. It's like, wait, you know, how many women I've worked with, and I'm sure you too, it's just like, will not give their gift. And you're like, pulling my hair, please.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
like, it
because we
takes
can see
time,
it.
everyone takes time, but also like you do the work, you do the somatic work, and it's like, there's just something gets free, you know, where then you just like, and you,
Yeah.
it's not about you anymore. You're here to serve. And it's like, it doesn't matter if I feel like a piece of shit. It doesn't matter. I could still show up and be like, you know what, guys, I feel like a piece of shit, but these is, I've learned some really helpful things. You know, they're not working today, but you know, they'll work for me later tomorrow. So let's do this. And by the end of the class, I feel amazing.
I think that's the important key thing, right? What you just said is it's when you're of service, it's not about you. You know, like sometimes
Yeah.
it's like the paradoxical thing about emotion is like, yeah, your emotions are valid. And also a good space holder will also be like, I don't give a fuck how you feel right now.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't care about your emotions right now.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Like
about this thing that you're avoiding.
channel. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Switch
So
the
it's
channel.
like, it's both, you know, it's
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
and there can be both, and there can be many things happening simultaneously at once. And that's the superpower, you know, and yeah, the more you practice this and utilize the muscle, those who think like we are, you know, outspoken and vulnerable, and it's like, well, that's all of us, no matter what, but I don't have anything. What do I have to lose
Yeah.
when I'm coming from my heart and when I'm being of service and when I feel like this is God streaming through me?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm not going to be hung in town square in this life or be burned at the stake. I know that.
Right. Right.
Done that, been there. Not going to have that happen.
Right.
I'm okay. I can do this, you know? And we have to get to we have to lose shit. And well, I like to rephrase in this word sacrifice. You know, some people, it's a heavy word because of church, but
No, I love it. It's so
you
good.
have to sacrifice things in order to move forward in parts of yourself too. So,
and that's the thing. It's like sometimes, and you off even the parts of ourselves that we're not, that are like killing us. It's like that too is like a painful death, an uncomfortable experience. Like it's just allowing ourselves to also find ways that we can be with what's uncomfortable, you know, because it's like we could think, well, I don't want this part of me anymore. And, you know, on your best, you're like, I will never settle. You know what I mean? Like people are always like, don't settle, you know, and I'm like, you know, like what's really going on in your relationship?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure some people are actually not settling, but like that usually only comes from really hard moments that we're either in or we just got out of, where we're like, doing that, you know, and it's like, oh girl, yeah, go. And then like, again, I'll cheerlead you all day, but I'll also be like, yeah, and like, let's rewind for a second. Like, you know, like what you were just saying, that version of you in the house and the, you know, with the gate, the door open, you know, the cage with the fucking doors open. It's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, again, we can have both. Like we can have empowerment, we can like, you know, and it's like, we gotta look at what we're doing and things we've done and hold that space of both forgiveness, but also like fierceness, that tenderness, but also fierceness, you know, because sometimes it's just like, we gotta like, just like, like rubber band on the wrist, bitch, you know, like stop going down that train.
I always say that like now I'm softening and I'm moving towards my rising, which is Libra. So I still have my sword and shield, but I've just placed it now above my bed and it's got a little like, you know, a halter that I don't carry them around, but they're still fucking there. Yeah. So just so you know, it's there. And if I need them, they're there. And I'm not going to play the martyr ever. I mean, passive aggressive martyrdom is not in my nature, but it's not feeling as though I need to in some way not be this fiery and not be to be some sort of like spiritual way or to go into the left-handed path or
Yeah.
tap into the Libra,
Yeah.
yeah, Mother Lion will still rip your throat out,
Yeah.
you know?
Totally.
So I think I said that same thing once before on a call, like on one of your one of the churches.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said that's so funny.
Yeah. Cause I remember you talking about that in the story.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, I mean, that's part of why I love working with the goddesses, honestly, because like, you know, there are these frequencies, it's like, you know, literal frequencies of these, you know, flavors of our essence. And so, yeah, when you need that sword, it's like, you know, like, wait, there's a fierce mother, you know, there is a fierce mother. Or if you look at nature, I mean, look up some fucking videos of volcanoes or whatever, you know, it's like fierce nature is like fierce mother. She's here. No, and she's in us, you know what I mean? And I think, and I think that also can play into us in healing our own masculine, not meaning masculine from like a tantric perspective, but like more of an archetypical masculine, meaning like protection and like really like the container, you know what I mean? Like what you were saying, it's like you're having this like, you know, it's like then G-spot orgasms are like that, like scream your head off, you know. That's why people are afraid, because you have to be willing to like be like, I might uncontrollably scream my head off in your face, and hopefully you'll love that, you know, or hopefully, you know, they can learn to love it, or, you know, you can find somebody who does, because it's important. Otherwise it's gonna, you know, well, you don't need to find somebody who loves it, you just need to do it, and then, you know,
See what happens.
yeah, it's all good. We got to set the tone. I'm sorry. Please don't wait. And yeah, and it's like to know that there's these different elements too of our own, like we need containers if we're really intense, emotional, femme kind of oriented people. Like we need lots of containers, and we need to learn how to be the container. You know, we need to learn how to like come into a healthy masculine, you know, into our own, the fathers that we never had, into like who and how, you know, we can hold what's deeply vulnerable within us, you know, because so many women waste so much time just like in so much pain around that not being held, you know, but never having someone just like open up that door to say like, well, what if you hold it? And I know that's not like the ultimate satisfying thing, but I can tell you from my own direct experience, it's not that different. Like having someone else hold, like meaning having a partner hold the most vulnerable, tender parts of me, it's so sweet. And it's like, it like literally, of course, because I've cried about it many nights over my life of being like, whoa, you know, Venus and Pisces, like drama to no end, abandonment to no end, unconditional love, no end, you know, and like, he's always a piece of human being. Some days it's like I'm not available for that. I'm in my own thing over here, you know? And it's like, okay, well, I got me.
Yeah. It's like when you're going through a crisis and you call every fucking person you normally do and no one answers.
How many people have that experience? We all have.
Yeah. Then when you start doing this work, you realize exactly what the fuck is happening. And you're like, okay, God, I see you. I hear you. Okay.
Yeah, like, but can we please like
let me just try one more person. That's when my Scorpio-ness will spiral.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that. I love that so much. It's so powerful.
Yeah. But yeah, this is a powerful conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so nice to chat with you.
Yeah, I just feel like something that we're going to be talking about so much more as time goes on. And the last 2 years really cracked a lot of people open because of what's been going on in the world. And I feel like, yeah, this is a way through, a huge way through, like the somatic parts of the body. And it's day by day, take it day by day.
Yeah. And I love all the insights that you always share. You know, they always really, I feel like ground things into, you know, into our reality, into the day-to-day, into like, okay, this is what's happening now, but like, you know, there's always that kind of grounded element to it that I really appreciate as a Taurus. As a Taurus who like, well, I have my sun and my Chiron are in Taurus and Mercury. Anyways, I'm like, I have no Earth. And I'm like, I forgot. I do. I have 3 planets, but I just feel like everything else just so much. And I've had to learn so much to be like, here in this body, you know, because I really didn't start out there. I really started out like not just like temporarily disassociating. I was like not anywhere near my body. Like I was like an alien, you know, and so this is a lifelong journey for me that I'm so grateful and so humbled and like beyond words, just blessed to be in the experience of. And I love holding space for others to lean into whatever layer of the work they're meant to lean into in a deep way, you know, because for me, depth is the only way, because I don't function in any other. I suffer more when I try to function not in depth. And a long time ago, I was like, you know what? I just need to find other people that are like,
Yeah.
able to have a deep moment and then be like, okay, like I'm clicking into like something else, you know, like I can like move around. I don't have to stay here, but I need to articulate this, but then I'm going to move right over here, like, which feels way better, but I'm not going to ignore this like dark cloud of like whatever abandonment I'm feeling in this moment, you know, and then later I'm like, okay, let's talk about what I want. This is what I want. Always coming back to that for me, like I said before.
Yeah, I think for me, it's equally like the depth and the deep, but I throw the humor in there so that like some people, it's like more digestible that way. But every time I'm being humorous or like putting on a Southern accent or something, it's me really actually just being an asshole and like super facetious. But like in a way that, you know, I'm speaking what I believe are truths and super deep stuff. So I just can't not have the humor. You know, this all is fucking hilarious. Every part of this, the things we argue with other humans about, the things we fight about, like the things we make a big deal that aren't, like so much is humorous and laughing.
And it's essential. It's like even from like a super kind of like nerdy, like neuroscience and like trauma informed, humor is a part of, like, we cannot heal trauma without humor. It's actually essential. It's not even like a side note. It's like, it's an essential piece. And I also think the same is true for really deep spiritual work. And anybody that experiences like embodied liberation or has incarnated to experience that, meaning in terms of spiritual, you know, masters and things like that, because I do think that they are real and I do think that they do exist. I don't think they're like on Instagram usually, but sometimes. But anyways, like meaning like they really incarnated to just be that, like the ego isn't so much of a thing. And they're always just like hilarious and have deep laughs, you know, like my teachers, like deep guttural, like just joy, you know, and then again, to kind of bring it back to the relational realm, again, it's like, I could never be with somebody who didn't make light and make jokes and make fun of me, even when I get mad about it, because I wouldn't make it. We wouldn't make it. The relationship, the love would not sustain, because my trauma and like the depths that I go to, like I need to be with somebody who's like snapping it out with a joke, like making, you know, just like I need that humor because, it's important. And also, you know, why I try when I teach, it's like, I got to bring it in. You got to like, just happens naturally because I'm, you know, that works for me, you know. So I think it's just, I've always taken that in and followed or fell into environments with teachers and guides and healers that really hold that space of humor.
For me, it builds a sense of safety and connection on a deep level. If like I can talk shit to you and you can talk shit back to me, and it's not like it's truth, but it's digestible and you know you're safe enough to do that. And then if it's too much in the moment, you know, the person will be like, hey, gone too far. That's too much. Like back the fuck off. You know,
I say that like 5 times a week. No, too much. But 9 times out of 10, I'm like, ha. It's so important. Comedy. I mean, I know I need to go. I need to probably wrap this up, but we love comedy so much. Like we go to comedy shows every time we're in New York. Like it's just, I love comedy. I love funny people. And I think there's something so necessary about it, you know? So good.
It's pushing the edge of ourselves. Like, what can we get up there and say that's like super uncomfortable, or that we might even be like, oh my God, I can't believe they said that.
Yes.
Like, And I kind of, most of the time I'm like, I wish I could say that, or I felt that. Like, I agree. Shit.
Totally.
Okay, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Love it.
So, okay, well, I will put in the description the best ways for people to find you and get in touch with you and your
Thank you,
website and
Britt.
everything. Thank you so much.
You're
It's brought me so
welcome.
much joy.
Love you. I'm really happy
Love
to be
you.
here. Yeah.